This week on Insights as a Service, we're talking about why fibre is better than 5G, what NBN Co can learn from the New Zealand UFB experience, and how TFF, one of New Zealand's fibre carriers, is ensuring there's equitable access to online learning and work. This week, to help me get through all of that, I'm joined by subject matter expert Richard Riley from TFF. Let's get stuck in. In the same way that a lot of people see my title of Chief Revenue Officer and say that's made up, which is true in the sense that everything is made up, basically. What's a Chief Customer Officer nowadays? What does that entail?
Well, it's a new role for me, Brendan. As you know, I've been here for 11 years now, so I'm kind of like a pioneer of the kind of UFB revolution. I've had a number of titles. Started as a program manager, program director for establishing the local fibre company, then Chief Marketing Officer, so that's fairly self-explanatory. Yep. Chief Operations Officer, again, fairly self-explanatory. Chief Customer Officer is all about looking after the most important people in the business, which obviously is our customers. I've been in that role for about 4 or 5 months, and not a great time to come into a Chief Customer Officer role, really, when you consider that hardly anybody's available to go and meet.
Yes,
so really looking forward to getting out and meeting, my counterparts and as many of the customers, the retailers as possible over the next few months as we come out of Omicron, hopefully, and can move forward.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's dive into the NZUFB model for anyone that doesn't know about it. Do you want to give us a quick, 1,000-foot high view of UFB and the part that TFF plays in that?
Sure. So we were originally successful in bidding for our regions in the UFB model, which was a Crown tender back in 2011. And we were awarded basically the Central North Island. So the UFB model basically was a public-private partnership. It was Crown funded with a payback model, which we then undertook to build the fibre to the premise network. So we called that the communal build, which were basically running the ducts from central offices right the way through to the curb, if you like. And then the next era was obviously the connection, so running the last mile connection from the curb or the fibre access point through to the premise. And we partnered with the Crown and built our networks probably over about 3 to 4 years. Finished the original tranche in 2015 ahead of schedule. Went back for more. We loved working with the Crown, so we got another 28 towns, smaller towns this time for the next tranche of the expansion. Mm-hmm. And we finished building that around about 2019, 2020. And since then, we've just been busy connecting customers to the communal network. So that's the drill shot or the overhead connection to the external termination point in the wall, and getting customers hooked up and activated.
Cool. Great use of the word tranche there as well a couple of times. So I like that.
Well,
it's good.
Having been here 11 years, Brendan, I've had to kind of break it up into tranches.
That's great use again. All right. So how many premises have you guys connected now, or at least how many premises fall within your coverage area and can be connected?
So it's never a precise number. We go on a number which we agreed on with the Crown, and we add greenfields and infill to that over time. We have an addressable market, which I think is the number you're looking for, 244,000 premises that are able to connect to Tuatahi First Fibre network. And so far, we've physically connected around about 185,000 of those premises. They're not all active subscribers currently. So our penetration, which is the physical connections, is 76%. And our uptake, which is active subscribers, is 72%. So we've got 176,000 happy customers on our network today.
How does that compare with the other LFCs, the Enable, the North Powers, Chorus is an LFC, I don't think, but how does it compare to their stats?
We're all within 4 or 5% of each other. I think the Crown recently released the latest MB stats, which was 69% uptake across the whole of UFB. So we're very close to that milestone of 70%, which is fantastic. I believe Chorus around that mark, around about 69%. and Enable are very similar to us, I believe. So they're probably in the early 70s, and North Power probably approaching 70% as well. So there's not a lot
So you're
between
beating
us.
Chorus, is what you're saying.
Well, we finished our network ahead of Chorus. Chorus had 70% of UFB to build. We had about 15% of UFB to build. So we had a bit of a head start advantage there. We got done quicker.
It's very generous of you. It's very generous. Hey, we should get into some juicy stuff, which is I obviously live in Australia. NBN is a thing. It's not necessarily a good thing. With your wealth of knowledge in the building of fiber networks across large areas, what do you think NBN Co can learn, or the Australian government perhaps can learn from what you've achieved in New Zealand?
That's a great question, and we've thought about this and looked over the ditch many times over the last 10, 11 years. And I think if I could sum it up, I'd probably say it's the simplicity and consistency of how we've built UFB and what UFB is all about. There is very little ambiguity. It's fibre to the premise. Whereas I think in comparison, NBN Co, if they were going to start again or try and recalibrate, they appear to have suffered from a lot of complexity of the legacy to hybrid to full FTTP in certain areas, and probably a significant lack of consistency. I think that makes standards really challenging, for at a wholesale level, which then flows onto the retail level. Customers probably don't know what their set expectations are. And we hear stories, and there are facts around. If you live on one side of the street, you get the full fibre to the premise. If you live on the other side of the street, you can maybe get a hybrid coax cable to the curb and then fibre back to the node. So I think that makes it quite tough. And it just seems to be a mixed hybrid model, which has just driven complexity into the whole thing.
I think the aim there, right, was that they were trying to make use of existing infrastructure, but the long-term outcome is that it drove costs up, complexity up, and made it harder to sell.
Unexpected and unintended outcomes, right? And I think the other key thing there would be probably the political landscape in Australia, certainly more changeable than New Zealand, and the influence, I think, on the NBN Co has been quite different to what UFB has been. If you put your political colours to one side here in New Zealand, I think successive governments have supported the UFB network and seen it as a very, very good thing for our society and our economy, and that's for now, and obviously more so into the future. We certainly feel as though the government, having left it to Crown infrastructure partners, they left it in capable hands to basically bring the whole of the kind of wholesale industry forward, and the retailers. We had fixed pricing or price caps in place. We had very, very clear standards about how to build the network for consistency. All of these things have certainly played out to New Zealand's benefit. And I think the result, most would argue, is that it's a mostly cooperative and stable wholesale to retail model. And that drives the appropriate competition and outcomes, in my view.
No, you're right. And I think that standardization of deployment fiber to the premise is the one and only access model deployed under UFB in New Zealand, means that there's that scalability, right? You can already see what you guys are doing, where you've gone from 1 gig access speeds, now 10 gig access is becoming the predominant model, certainly with hyperfiber. You just can't do that in Australia, certainly not universally. So then it starts being, if you've got some new type of access you want to deploy, it's available in some areas. It's available, on request if you live within XYZ suburb. That complexity just doesn't exist in New Zealand.
No, I think we've done a great job at future-proofing this technology, ahead for whatever comes next. We laid a very logical architecture, and I would say that the hard work is done now in terms of the physical side of the network, and obviously there'll always be upgrades in the central office. There's always technology upgrades through vendors, but we deployed a GPON network. And we're already into the 10 GPON network. We're looking at 25 GPON. Chorus has just trialed some great stuff in their lab as well. And our vendor, Adtran, who we've just partnered with, is already looking to get the 50 GPON into the lab environment for this year. So, the way that we've built this network makes it a lot easier for the successive waves of technology advances. To always make sure, our fundamental is to always stay faster and more capable than the demand. And I think we saw that through the early years when we all started on 30 megabits per second or up to 100 megabits per second. And everybody said there'll never be a use case for 1 gig. We launched 1 gig, 8 years ago now, and it's now our most popular acquisition product. And the same thing will happen as the next wave of technology comes along. The more applications, 16K TV, more virtual reality, more AR. The dependence of the applications on a very, very good, very, very fast, very, very wide pipe capability is just going to increase and increase. And I think there will be, use cases coming on stream to support hyperfiber and 25 GPON and 50 GPON in the future. So, that we start to talk about legacies when we get to this stage of the kind of uptake curve, and the technology curve is just galloping ahead. And the use cases for fiber, really, I think we're just scratching the surface at the moment. I think it's well debated.
Oh, for sure.
That the use cases
is,
are yet to be developed.
Yeah, but like the key is to not have the bandwidth available being a blocker, right? And that's what I think we're going to have a lag in Australia, where there's these new applications, these new bandwidth hungry. The tech becomes a thing, and then there's a catch up phase. Whereas in New Zealand, it's we've got so much headroom already that really there's very little in the way of we could be a really dynamic little economy over there, because the table's set basically for that stuff to come into the market, and businesses over there be ready. But I was just thinking, how you said that there's always there's no use case for this, there's no customer demand for the speed, but there always is within a short period. With my other hat on, and I guess your customers being the telcos, I remember being in a smaller telco when UFB first came out, and 30 by 10 was okay, and anything around that, so 50 meg was okay. But then when we started talking about gig speeds, we're going, our network's going to crumble. It'll take 3 customers to swamp a pipe going between cities, and how's this going to work? And so I imagine you don't just get pushback from end users as to the justification for a higher price point, but also your RSPs probably sometimes get into protective mode, maybe to sort of lag a little bit behind what can be done.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we are the channel is where it's at for us. Our retail partners or access seekers are the channel for us to get the connections and sustain ourselves with revenue. And the use case needs to come from them developing the services and the innovation through to consumers. And I think, as we saw 8 or 9 years ago, the onset of, over-the-top streaming media was absolutely key. Netflix, Amazon, Neon, all of those kind of applications that came on stream kind of drove the need for a faster and more capacity. And it's always been the gamers. That's quite a small segment in the community, or in the fiber users. They're always demanding faster, better. Just give me the best. Just give me the best possible service, which gives me the lowest latency, the highest reliability. I cannot afford to drop a beat when I'm in one of my games. Some of these guys are professionals. And then it then transcends into, so they're the hyper users that we've always got to be ahead of. And we've always got to have the capability to serve that market. And then over time, mass market, in any demand curve, comes through and takes forward as well through the adoption. So, it's we're always looking for our retailers to, make requests, but that doesn't always work. We do need to, put the cart before the horse from time to time, and make sure that we can demonstrate that we do have the capability to, go to the exponential levels of technology. And that's our modus operandi, is to make sure that, we are, now that we've done the physical elements of this particular type of technology, the end parts, the layer 2 and the speed and the optics are always going to be outstripping demand.
It's for me, when you guys come out with a 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig symmetrical product, there's always going to be an ISP that looks to be first to market, to differentiate their own brand. That creates competitive pressure. No one wants to be left behind. So it kind of starts to gain a momentum of its own. But it's just interesting looking back at how terrified we all were in the telco space as to what these speeds were going to do to our whole business model around, contended pipes between cities or whatever. But overall, I think what's interesting is that the usage patterns on, say, gig service are very similar to a 200 service. You
Yeah.
don't see anything happening too much, but people don't like to be limited. So if you give them the sense of freedom and unfettered access to whatever they want to do, it justifies often a higher price point, but the actual overhead on the network tends to very much stay pretty steady.
Yeah, and I think what we see as well is it goes in cycles. We start to see the demand from the end user consumer, and then, as you say, the early adopter RSPs start to upgrade their handover ports and the parts in their technology stack to be able to deal with the onset more and more of these types of users. And then the mainstream hits, and they're very, very well prepared. We did see some learnings from some retailers in the early days of UFB where they kind of got especially around the Netflix revolution. We got a lot of customers coming onto fiber very, very quickly. We were connecting 4,500 customers a month at our peak. And I think that the handover ports struggled to keep up. The kind of evolution of going from 1 gig to 10 gig and beyond caught a couple out. But that all got resolved very, very quickly because obviously they've got very key metrics to serve the customers and make sure that there is no contention on that part of the network through their own devices.
Yeah. So there's something interesting going on with NBN Enterprise Ethernet, which is their sort of HSNS BS4 equivalent, right? Their CIR 1-to-1. Well, it's actually not necessarily 1-to-1. There's three kind of flavors, 1-to-1, I think 1-to-2, and best effort. But on the handover ports, you just got me thinking. They actually enforce contention models to be the same on the handover port as the actual access, so that customers are basically guaranteed end to end. But what that does is really destroys that contention based model that ISPs, telcos have always based their I guess their commercial model on. But it also means that when you make the best effort NBN EE or any other service open to the ISPs to choose how they contend that handover port, everyone's going to buy that one, but that one is less expensive. So the return on the actual fiber investment for NBN Co is actually less because of the way they've regulated the purchasing of that product. It's a weird situation.
Could be an engineer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just purely due to intelligence levels, not me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tricky. Okay, let's talk about you guys being at the end of putting, I assume, millions of kilometers of fiber into ducts in streets. You've basically finished that. Maybe you're still doing a bit more rollout. What's the transition like going from an infrastructure build company to essentially a services company?
Well, you're exactly right, and I think we've had a long time to prepare for this. And as I say, we talked about eras early on. The first era was establishing the local fiber company in parallel to the build era, in parallel then later on to the connections era. I think we will always be connecting customers. We will always be expanding our network. The economy here, is enduring despite the current challenges. The pipeline for greenfields and infill and more houses is strong. So we're always in a good position to obviously serve customers within our existing footprints, but also to go beyond and collect new greenfield opportunities outside of our traditional areas. But more than that, I think it's meeting that market, as it grows and making sure that you're there with compelling, delivery models to make sure that you can service these communities very, very quickly. But we will be transitioning, and we've started that transition into basically becoming a world-class asset management business that continually stays ahead of the technology curve, that does some really smart things with our networks, innovates as much as it can within the constraints of the model, but always serves its customers. We've worked very, very hard to get to our 72%. We aspire to get to 80% plus over time, and then we've got to look after and love those customers and keep them. So it doesn't stop. The efforts that were in the build or in the connections era go into looking after the network, maintaining it, upgrading it, making sure it's always ahead of the curve, but also listening to customers and working out exactly what they need so that we can adapt as the technology world, gallops ahead. So we've been well prepared for this. We've got an enormous focus on strategic asset management planning, the sustainability of our business, and the environmental goodwill within our business to make sure that we can continue to grow sustainably and continue to add more and more delighted customers to the network in a way that delivers the right returns to sustain the business, but also gives back to the community at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are in a really interesting space because on the one hand, you've got this regulated sell price, right? The government and yourselves have entered into an agreement where you're largely set in what you can charge for your base product. Then you've got some variables like voice. We can talk a bit about what you can do in the voice space. But at the same time, the market around you isn't regulated, and I imagine you've got some competitive pressure coming in from 5G fixed wireless, for example, which I know Spark and Vodafone over there are keen to push because obviously the cogs are lower and they don't have to deal with you guys cut on it, so to speak. So how do you keep a focus on that bottom line in a regulated price with a regulated price point where you have got you haven't got a monopoly? There are competing alternatives for the end users to run with.
Again, look, that is one of the beauties of being in this industry. It is quite complex in areas. You've said there that we have a regulated price. Largely, we don't. We are a little different to Chorus. We don't
shows what I know.
We don't have an anchor product per se, but we're naturally, we are very much related to the elements that Chorus are under. We're now regulated by the Telco Act, and it's under the careful watch of the Commerce Commission, having exited the Crown-controlled era. But you're absolutely right. We do have strong competition from Chorus, from fixed wireless and mobile services. So we've got a disclosure obligation. It's an ID regime. It's very similar to how electricity, gas, and airports regulated industries operate. And annually we need to provide, that transparency to the stakeholders, and that includes our competitors who are often vertically integrated, certainly the bigger ones. So it is we do need to walk through that and be very, very cognizant of the moving parts within the regulatory model. We need to operate, certainly from a pricing level, we need to operate, sensibly and logically. And we believe that we deliver significant value for money, especially in the Bitstream 2 mass market era. And then, it gets a little bit more complex as you move into the higher grade elements of diversity circuits and the Bitstream 4 point-to-point. But we've operated in a very clear regulated or quasi-regulated model for 10 years. We're very used to it. We absolutely love competition, so long as we can create a fair and even playing field, which is not always the case. But yeah, we've just become very used to operating, under the very close watch of key government stakeholders, and that will continue because we will be a quasi-regulated business for a long time to come.
So we all want to drive ARPU up, right? Like the more revenue per customer or per end user is the goal. How are you guys best set to do that? Have you got more items that you're looking to sell via the wholesale channel, or is it that you would like to drive a clearer distinction between the types of services? In Australia, that would be NBN TC4 versus NBN EE, for example. Over in New Zealand, it's lots of acronyms here. Apologies to everyone, but it's your BS2s, which is your baseline product, basically single VLAN, pretty basic SLA on your network. Other than the multi-VLAN capability, maybe more max over it, maybe a better SLA, or say 6-hour store or 12-hour store or something. How do you drive people to that next tier up of products and or add more items per sale? Like, what's your strategy there?
Well, I think you've probably ticked off the big list of things that we do. We split it into two things. ARPU is, as you say, is a driver of many a business, and it's certainly an interesting metric for us. of equal importance, I think, is retention. I think that especially when you're in a subscriber based model, you want to make sure that the revenues that you fought really hard to acquire to get onto your network, you want to try and keep. And I think the two are interlinked in terms of continually making sure that you're looking to offer more value add. We can certainly do things at the wholesale layer, which presents massive opportunities, I think, to business retailers, where we can add certain value wrappers and bundle it in free of charge, or as again, giving more for the same price. Things like you say, the service level agreement wrapper, especially for business, very, very sensitive to disruption. Occasionally every network has interruptions. The key for business is to make sure that they get restored very, very quickly. And I think that value add is a massive draw card for our business and fiber as a whole. And we layer that in, and traditionally we used to charge for those elements. Over time, we've actually put them in as value adds, kept the price where it is, and said to the business retailers, here's your opportunity to attract more of your business customers over from other technologies to fiber, where they're going to be very well looked after with a great product and great fault restore times. And that's basically where we have played in that space. I mean, recently in the mass market, which are probably less interested in from a kind of business RSP perspective, but we've trebled or doubled a lot of the speeds. We recently upgraded the 120 mainstream plan to 300, 100 bit stream 2.
Yep.
And similarly for business, a lot of our SME businesses were on the 100 product, and we trebled that to 300. The 200 suite went up to 500. And again, all of these, I think, over time, it's a case of giving more for the same price to enhance the value that's embedded within those products and services. And that will continue, I think, as time goes on. We've always got to be giving more back as the use case for businesses increases.
Yeah, sure. I think I don't want to throw you a bit of a curveball here. Not sure if I don't want to get you in the shit. So feel free to push back on this one. But goes without saying that obviously Lightwire's your favorite customer. Like we get that, and I think you've said that to me countless times. So I'm sure that's on the record.
That's to every customer.
I'm sure you do.
Measure, Brendan.
Ironically, I don't think you ever have actually said that to me. So now I know you're saying it to everyone but me. But anyway, so I guess my question is, with the big three, like now that we've got Vocus owning 2 degrees, we've got Spark and Vodafone with their own mobile networks. Do you find them engaging in a different way with you to those ISPs that don't have an alternative play to fiber in the ground? Do they look to primarily spruik their own fixed wireless offering, and then when a customer has a certain demand for bandwidth up to XYZ, that they then push it? Like, what's the difference in engagement?
Look, I think inevitably, and as I mentioned earlier, all we look for is a level playing field, and we love competition. We've always thrived under competition. I think there's been a misconception that a local fiber company has just this massive monopoly. It's not the case. Certainly in our CBDs and from a business perspective, there are multiple fiber networks running through Hamilton, Tauranga, Whanganui, and New Plymouth. And lots of those customers have got no need to change fiber provider and come over from Chorus or Vodafone or Vocus or InspireNet or any of those kind of fiber networks. But in the mass market, certainly the vertically integrated mobile network operators, they've got their own strategy, and we totally accept that. We often think from our shoes in their shoes, what would they do? They've got fixed wireless is a good product, and it certainly has a niche in the market currently, and probably over time as well. It's a bit of a horses for courses situation, leveraging any of your assets is a good thing to your investors and also to the efficiencies of your networks. But so long as you manage it, and I think we do see some challenges around in terms of contention on your core mobile services, and over time that gets resolved. But we do see some of the retailers obviously pursuing alternate strategies. But to be fair to all of that, they know as well that very large segments of their end user customers are fiber customers, and they will always keep them as fiber customers. So I think it's down to that choice. And what we've seen since fixed wireless really kind of took hold is that they've taken a balanced view, and they are proceeding through strategies to get the best out of their networks, and also serve certain segments or subsegments of the community or their customer base in a way that suits them. And we're okay with that. It's our purpose is to make sure that we promote the benefits and create awareness about fiber, what it can do, and how accessible it is. But at the end of the day, it's down to the retailers to go to market to sell services through their brands, and they own the relationship with the end user. We never talk to an end user about a retailer. We've never done that, even though we engage with the community. It's not our place. Our place is education and marketing about fiber. We think fiber is unquestionably the best access technology, and there's a lot of use cases to show that is there. It might not be for everybody, and that's just part of being part of a market.
Yeah. So you just touched on it, the strategy, marketing strategy, which, anyone who listens to this podcast knows that I constantly go on about marketing. Not that, well, probably because it's the only thing I have a little bit of an idea about, but the idea for you guys is going around the market, the RSPs to go direct to market and do that education piece, so that those end users end up going to their retailer and going, hey, I want fiber. I've seen adverts. I understand what it can do. That's the access method for me. So that you can create that awareness of what it is, why they should want it, and then they go ask that question. So really your whole play is market education.
Absolutely.
Create demand.
Absolutely right. I mean, we've just started, we've stayed clear of door-to-door for the first few years, and we've seen the model work in other LFC areas, as long as I think that the messaging is correct and appropriate, and that we stay within our non-discrimination terms. Our role has always been, and it was in the original contracts, to educate about what fiber is, how you can access it, and why it might be good for you. And we encourage the end user consumer to reach for fiber, but have a conversation with their chosen broadband provider. It's as simple as that. We can put our best foot forward, but at the end of the day, we recognize that consumers have choice, and I think that's a really good thing.
What is your elevator pitch for fiber? Like, you're talking to your average punter in the street and you're trying to tell them why fiber is amazing. What's the message?
It's the fastest access technology available. It's the most consistent. It's the most reliable. You can stream as many devices as you could possibly want to over, the high value fiber plans. It's very rarely going to go out. It's not subject to contention on your network. It's pretty okay when it rains. And it's future-proofed, and your home will be future-proofed if you've got a fiber connection. So get on board.
Cool. I'm sold. One fiber, please.
You want hyperfiber with that, all right, Brendan?
Mate, we've been getting some pretty good demand for that, actually. It's picking up, which is nice. But we've got to do some case studies with you, I think. We've done some panel chat stuff, but we'll do that at some point. But before I get all too salesy on it, I'll stop talking about that. Hey, one thing I want to talk about as well is equivalency laws. You guys are still bound by those, right? Like you've got to treat everybody the same. How much does that limit your ability to get kind of, sort of funky with your marketing and kind of, engage in unique ways?
It doesn't.
I guess it's just as simple as, well, we're going to give everyone the same chance to buy in, and if they're not interested, at least we offer it. Is that pretty much it?
Largely. The whole point of equivalence really is to, there's two things. There's non-discrimination. So we have to treat all of our retail partners or access seekers exactly the same. We can't differentiate what we offer a fiber-only RSP to a vertically integrated competitor who's selling a competing product. We're not allowed to do that, never will. But equivalence is really about making sure that we treat and handle access seekers in exactly the same way as we would treat ourselves. And that's where the unbundling or POMFAS model comes into play. So we have to, the input services, the wholesale input services model needs to be equivalent, so that we're not giving ourselves an advanced capability in terms of our input prices for bundled services as we would if we were unbundled by an access seeker. So that's what equivalence is all about. It's about making sure that we don't have an advantage pricing-wise and input-wise in our layer one inputs to a layer one inputs of an unbundled player.
Right. We're probably going to lose people here with the fiber chat,
Yeah.
and PONFAS particularly is another one of those crazy acronyms. But have you actually had anyone take you up on the layer one unbundling that basically is PONFAS? Has anyone actually started to roll that out at the exchanges?
Not yet. No. We were ready. I think it was 2018. We had to be ready by. So we achieved that milestone. We went through the process, invested significant resource in making sure we were ready. Really important. It was an obligation, and it was a bit like a field of dreams. You build it and they will come. And the way that I think that the model works and the lessons learned probably in copper unbundling or unbundled copper local loop, I think has probably played a large part in it's easier and probably more economical from a bundled layer one, layer two model, so long as the prices remain reasonable. And we're very conscious of that. We don't want to create a situation whereby we're effectively encouraging an unbundled scenario. I think it's unlikely in the short term. I could be wrong. But certainly the model's there. Should anyone wish to give it a go, the key thing I think is scalability, the ability to encourage 80% of your splitter customers to uptake, and then potentially it becomes a workable model. But unless you've got scale and a very, very good pitch, it's going to be quite hard, I think, to make that business case work.
So for the people listening, really what we're talking about here is that you would be able to either put in your own ONT or access a sort of an ONT that could be reconfigured. You would have fiber going that you would light essentially back to a splitter cabinet. You'd probably put some gear from memory in the splitter cabinet that would then go back to the exchange, where you would have a handover port. It was basically along those lines, and you would have the ability to light it from the customer end right the way through to the exchange, essentially, with some smarter things that I know how to describe in between the two things. But that was basically the idea. Rather than buying it layer two for a set price, you have access to this fiber at a lower price, but you can do whatever the hell you want with it. You could make it a 40 gig service if you knew how to make that happen. Good luck to you. But at the time, my recollection is that Vocus was making all sorts of noise about it. I think Vodafone was getting on the bandwagon. They were saying, we want this and we want it to be at XYZ price. Can't remember what it was. They weren't happy with the price in the end that came out from the LFCs and Chorus. But at about the same time, Hyperfiber came out and kind of just shut everyone up anyway, because all of a sudden there was 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig speeds on the horizon at very compelling price points. And that was pretty much the end of that. Is that how you remember it playing out?
Almost precise. Yeah.
Yay, I did it.
Top of the class for that one,
Sorry,
Brendan. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, that's it. But it was a smart play, right? Because that way, I think when we talk about equivalency, with my selfish hat on, it was great because we do not have the scale to have trucks on the road deploying kit at exchanges and splitters and having a field team out there. And like you said, the idea that you could make it viable without massive scale meant that only the big were going to benefit from the PONFAS rollout or the access to it, in my view. Whereas Hyperfiber was offered to the market en masse at a set price point, and everyone's got the same ability to make it work.
That's right. And, I think the other challenge that you've got there as well is, let's not shy away from this. Having a fiber install is not the simplest thing in the world. Certainly not the first one. We've certainly got better at it as an industry over 10 years of practice. But, inviting your customer to go through effectively, putting in another ONT inside the home is probably something that they might remember from last time and say, actually, I probably wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. So you got to have a pretty unique selling proposition to entice someone to bother with that. And now that the speeds are available, you're not going to go too far past 8 gig symmetrical, I wouldn't think. So, it's pretty hard to find the reason at this point.
I think, but being very open-minded about it, I think I've always seen it as I think it was always going to be unlikely in the early phases, but I do have an open mind about the future. And it's all down to innovation. Those two particular retailers that you mentioned promised a whole range of innovations at that layer 2 level and beyond. And we never got to see what that was going to be, and it's hard to.
Yeah, I was going to say, did they really get very specific though? Because all I remember is like, we're going to do stuff for gamers and we're going to innovate. It's like, okay, give us some examples. Yeah, gamers, innovation. Yep, examples, please. No examples. My recollection is there was a few buzzwords, but
you have to recognize as well that those two RSPs are two of my three biggest customers. And
they're great people.
And we love them just as equally as we love you, Brendan. But that's our world. We engage, and that's why we're part of the TCF. That's why we have relationships and account managers to engage with these guys. And there's never been a bad word said about unbundling directly to us. We've always been upfront and I think very measured, and the capabilities there. It's not for us to make a business case for the retail side. They're very capable of doing that themselves.
Yeah, you're very diplomatic, no matter how much you try and get a rise out of you. Okay, let's talk about digital equity, because you love talking about that, and I am open-minded and ready to learn. Talk to me about digital equity and why you care so deeply about it.
And this is not personal. This is there's a bit of personal in it as well. But from a Tuatahi point of view, we've long said that we aspire to get to a point in the uptake curve where we can sustain ourselves and also give back to the most vulnerable people in our community who've supported us all along. I mean, let's face it, it's universally unpopular infrastructure when you're deploying networks, roadworks associated with that. Not everybody can afford a broadband connection of any kind. And I think, we've certainly learned a lot about our communities in the 10 years that we've served them. And we strongly believe that digital equity, or bridging the digital divide, is a real problem. And we want to be part of the solution. And I think, at a wholesale level, we can certainly stimulate some benefit and go to places where we traditionally haven't gone before. I think what struck it home to us really was the COVID pandemic, where the reliance on a very, very good quality, solid, reliable, consistent broadband connection became the norm for as many households who were able to have it. But there were a lot of households that didn't have it for a number of reasons. And I think, digital equity is about a number of things. Clearly, it's about affordability. That's a barrier to access. But it goes further than that. I think there's a lot of members of our community that are scared of technology. And despite our efforts and best efforts to educate them along the way that, actually use of the internet can be a good thing. And then you've got a lot of users that are just, for want of a better word, apathetic towards technology and just don't care. All of those subsegments are at risk of being left behind, or are already left behind. So our pitch now is that, having reached, as we say, we've got 76% penetration. There's still 26% of households, less so businesses, but certainly households, that have not yet reached out to connect to fibre. And we ask ourselves why. There are other technologies that they may be using, and that's great. As I said, there's a place for different technologies across the whole community. But we want to make sure, at least, that we've tried our very, very best to reach the next, maybe 10 or 12% who could be capable of getting a fibre connection by putting forward ideas to the retail community to say, hey, look, we think that we have a space in our business and our finances to make sure that we do what we can to certainly cut down the affordability access barrier. So we are proposing, and we're consulting with retailers at the moment, a digital equity product that we think will go a long way to solving some of the dynamics of affordability, and also the education around what broadband can do in its various forms. So we're pretty passionate about it. We don't want, we know that we won't have 100% penetration. I think we're fairly certain about that, unless we start to get 2 gigabit circuits per home, as you see in Singapore. It's probably unlikely in some of our areas. But, we're going to make sure that we've done our best to at least stimulate some interest in the retailers to go and try and put a really, really good product into these communities. And I'm pretty confident that we'll get some uptake. So we're hoping to get maybe the next 5 or 10% in our mature markets. That's the UFB, original 8 UFB 1 towns, where anybody who really wanted fibre or knew about fibre would have reached out by now. We're well into the laggard and late adopter part of the curve. So we're convinced that there's a digital equity issue in what's left. So we're going to go and find out, and we'll learn a lot along the way. We may get some partners along the way. May well be some interest from other LFCs. And I think importantly as well, the government's probably got a role to play in this as well, certainly making.
Well, that was going to be my question, right? Is how are you guys currently engaging with the government to provide access to those areas that aren't really economically viable for you to reach out into? Because I know we own our own, as you know, our own fixed wireless network around the mid north island of New Zealand, and this is with my Lightwire hat on. And we've just been awarded some funding under the Rural Capacity Upgrade Program that the government's led through Crown Infrastructure Partners. So have you guys got something similar there with a fibre approach to reach some of those locations?
We certainly, you're absolutely right. The investment case to get to some of the remote parts of the rural areas is very challenging and does need a partnership approach. We've recently secured, as part of the rural capacity upgrade, around about 3,000 end user premises that we can build to and connect to, and that program's underway.
Nice.
And the demand is, I would just describe it as pent up. We're offering every customer that we pass, we're offering them what we call the Get Fibre Ready solution, which is, as we build the network down the street, we can put the connection into your home now so that it's ready, you're future-proofed, you're ready to go. Once the network's live, you just need to call your chosen broadband provider and activate. And that's proving to be very, very popular. We've probably got about 700 customers that have opted for that possibility already. But I think it just shows that, the demand in our rural areas, which in many ways are still the powerhouse of a lot of our local economies, is really, really strong. And that then makes us want to build more. So, certainly discussions with government need to continue to see how we can work together to build the network further out in like a spur, if you like, or to reach some of these areas. We constantly get approached by people who are within a few kilometres of the network with, can you not just push fibre down my street? It's like, well, we'd love to. But that's, to reach 2 or 3 houses, a couple of kilometres builds a pretty big case.
What's the cost of trenching now? I remember there used to be numbers thrown out like each meter is $100 or something like that, or $1,000 or something. What does it cost now?
Significantly more than that now. I think,
cool.
Obviously the cost of living elements that are surrounding all of us as consumers and as businesses, some of the minimum wage increases and some of the rules around, overseas workers and things have really pushed the rates up considerably. And it's a balance at the end of the day. It's you've got to accept that in an inflationary market, your cost base is going to increase. I mean, I think ours has increased somewhere around about 9% across the board in a single year. So that just gives you a flavour of the cost to build is increasing significantly. Ask any builder of a house right now.
I'm about to do that myself, to be honest. I've just signed a contract this week for renovation at the back of the house, and the guy who came to value the house for future value today was like, you seem to be paying a lot. I would argue too much. I'm like, yep, no shit, it's heaps. But it's the cheapest quote we got, so there we go. I'd say in a way I'm happy that it costs you quite a lot to build fibre, because that'll keep you out of too much of our network area in the Mid-North Island there. So sort of good, I suppose, would be my feedback to that. But also it's great to have more people getting access to high-speed internet, and I'm all about that digital equity, so good on you guys for focusing on it. The last question I've got for you is just talking about Huawei. So you guys initially rolled out the Huawei ONTs from memory. I think most of the LFCs did. I think
Enabled it,
as well. Yeah. And over here, there's been sort of just a blacklisting of Huawei, certainly when it comes to core infrastructure by the government. That was just a thing in Australia that happened. NNZ, what sort of pressure do you get, or have you been placed under to limit the use of Huawei tech on the network?
Well, it's probably an area I can't say too much about. You're quite right. It is an intriguing and at times sensitive topic. We operate, with the security services very, very closely and make sure that we go through the right protocols when we are bringing new Huawei devices or extending our network with Huawei equipment. We are in a multi-vendor situation now, and that's probably reflective of where we've got to. So we've brought on Adtran as our new technology partner. But you mentioned ONTs. That's obviously a key part of the network, which we've deployed 180,000 of those, Brendan, and going and replacing them all is not something that you're just going to do lightly. I think it will be on.
Weren't you saying to me that represents like half of your network cost, something like that? Or someone was giving me that figure. It's a big chunk of your overall network deployment cost.
And I think, especially when we start to consider residential gateway ONTs, the capability on that, and hyperfiber ONTs or the XGS ONTs, as time goes on, there will be a lot of swap out. But that's basically to upgrade the technology in the home to be able to cope with, the then end user in the home's demands. We have around about 8,000 of our original ONTs, which are still within their lifetime, and the primary ONT, of which we've got well over 100,000 deployed, are still going very strong, and there's certainly no requirement for us to swap those out at this point in time. But over time, and when I say over time, I'm talking 30, 40 years. Obviously we will refresh the equipment in the home on an as-needs basis or from a technology upgrade perspective.
Okay. Well, I'm going to read between the lines and say with Adtran deployed, people don't make changes for no reason. So it's all part of a bigger set of circumstances and requirements, et cetera, et cetera. Moving on. You touched on RGW, and this might be my last questions. Residential gateways, using the ONTs as that, you guys are following courses, I assume lead, unless you guys were first, but where essentially RSPs can just deploy services directly from the ONT, acting as a gateway or router, essentially. So you guys are doing that currently, right?
That's a really good question, and it's a timely question because, as we introduce our new vendor into our network, we are focusing on a number of priorities in certain parts of the Layer 2 space. We haven't had a significant amount of demand for residential gateway ONTs. We've watched very closely our colleagues at Chorus and their capabilities and their relative successes. It seems to have been quite a standoffish issue for some of the retailers. They're saying we don't really want, the wholesaler to be in that space. I would say we're making haste slowly is probably the diplomatic response to that right now. But we do see the logic, absolutely. The logic of having, one piece of kit in the home would certainly help with the digital equity play, for instance, will be a brilliant solution for that because I think it would enable a low cost, solution for an RSP as well if they were able to just leverage the existing equipment in the home. So I'm pretty confident that, down track, we watch the space, I suppose. We see the logic in the RGW. There are a number of spaces, I think, within the regulatory restrictions that I think we probably need to take a look at. There's certain things that we are allowed to do and certain things that we think we're not allowed to do that we'd just like to get clarity on as well. Certainly that Wi-Fi space is a very, very interesting space. And we don't, we've got 52 retail partners that we treasure as our channel, and it's about working together with them to get the right solution. So there hasn't been a lot of dialogue. There hasn't been a lot of dialogue with us on the RGW, but certainly our engineers and technicians have spent a lot of time in the lab looking at this particular thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because as soon as you start taking the edge closer to the end user, the support overhead, I imagine, ramps up as well. And do you scale out, and what's the return on that? But I can say anecdotally, so I've been working with a lot more other telcos with a new hat on under another company I've got involvement with, that actually has a distribution of some routers in NZ. And the shortage of routers in NZ has seen a lot of companies that are working with, or a lot of telcos that are working with Chorus, really look to
Yeah.
that RGW offering and go, right, that solves a problem. Bang, right there, I've got my access sorted. I don't have to turn away services. But yeah, agree. It's the lack of configurability on that offering is
Yeah.
potentially problematic. The Wi-Fi issue is a really interesting one. Where the the ONT is located. Like I've seen some ONTs deployed in toilets, right? Like they're all over the bloody place. They could be in garages. Do they
I'm
reach
pretty sure that
where
was
they need to
fake
get
news,
to?
Brendan. I reckon somebody photoshopped that. It was somewhere in Auckland.
We've still got it on record. We've got
My
that in our
mates
wiki
at Chorus
somewhere.
would never do that.
Who said it was Chorus? It
It
might have
was
been
an
you
Auckland.
guys. I've got it.
Yeah.
Oh, was it? No, we had it done. We genuinely had one underneath a basin in a bathroom in a like a SME situation. We've got it in our wiki somewhere. I'll get Dave to dig it up for me and send it through or something.
FTTT,
But
I guess that is.
yeah,
Or
yes,
the D, as
yes,
you
it
would
is.
call it.
Well done. Well, yeah. But anyway, Dunny, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, well done. Okay, cool. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting one for you guys. I think what I'm hearing is that this is a weird point in history where the availability of these routers is just so
I'd call
limited.
it a convergence. Yep.
Okay, well, there you go. Look, it's been a real interesting chat, and seeing the difference in your diplomatic, measured, patient tone versus my just swinging about and hoping for the best kind of approach. And it's been a nice pairing of of approaches. So yeah, we can leave it there. And I thank you for
Pleasure,
taking the
Brendan.
time
It's
to
always
join
good
us.
to chat. And yeah, any questions, just fire them through. We're always happy to engage.
Will do.
Cheers.
Thanks, mate. All right, that's it for another week. Thank you very much for joining me. If you're after Richard, you can get him on LinkedIn, Richard Riley, Riley. Great guy. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we will see you again next week. Thanks for listening.